Hello everybody, Miss Melissa here for our first ever Big Kid Book Club. I came up with the idea of this event because picture books aren't just for babies and preschoolers. There are so many fabulous picture books written for older kids. Sometimes they might tell a story, and sometimes there's lots of informational picture books where you can learn cool things, even in the format of a picture book. And today I'm going to share with you one of those stories. This story is called Balloons Over Broadway, and it is written and illustrated by Melissa Sweet. So it's Balloons Over Broadway, the story of the puppeteer of the Macy's Day Parade. How many of you have watched the Macy's Day Parade on Thanksgiving before? I'm sure many of you have, and if you have watched the parade, you've seen the giant balloons that we still get to see in the parade today. They look a little different than when they first started, but every year we look forward to seeing what giant balloons are going to be floating in the air. As you can see on this one, we've got a tiger. So this is the story of how those balloons came to be. You'll also notice on the cover that we have a medal here. This is an award-winning book. It actually won the Robert Seibert Medal, which is an award given out each year to one of the most distinguished informational books for children. So this means that not only is it a great picture book, but it also has won an award for the information told in the story. I love this book. It's a lot of fun to read, and the artwork is great, so let's dive right in and enjoy it. And you'll see here, Melissa Sweet likes to use lots of different materials in her illustrations. It's a lot of collage work. She's included lots of tools and toys that the puppeteer might have used when creating his puppets. So Balloons Over Broadway, the true story of the puppeteer of Macy's Parade. Written and illustrated by Melissa Sweet, and I want to thank Houghton Mifflin Books for Children for giving us permission to share it with you today. So this is Anthony, or Tony, Frederick Sarge. And she's even got a little description of this little person here saying, Sarge rhymes with arg, in case you want to know how to pronounce it. So this is who we are talking about. He lived from 1880 to 1942. So this is who this book's about. The quote here says, "Every little movement has a meaning of its own," and it's one of Tony Sargents' quotes. All right, I'm going to try to read this and let you see the pictures as well. From the time he was a little boy, Tony Sargent loved to figure out how to make things move. He once said he became a marionette man when he was only 6 years old. And do you know what a marionette is? A marionette is a puppet that is manned by a string. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the puppets that you use with your hands. With the marionette puppets, you have this little contraption, and you've got the strings that move the arms up and down, arms and legs, and sometimes mouths. His father asked him to feed their chickens at 6:30 in the morning every day. Tony Sargent had an idea. What if he could feed the chickens without leaving his bed? He rigged up some pulleys and ran rope from the chicken coop door to his bedroom. That night, he spread chicken feed outside the chicken coop door. So you've got the chicken coop here. 1. Spread the feed the night before. 2. Pull the rope. 3. That rope will open the chicken coop doors. And 4. The chickens can come out and eat. The next morning, Tony pulled on the rope, and the door to the chicken coop opened. The chickens ate their breakfast, Tony stayed snug in his bed, and his dad, impressed, never made Tony do another chore. Can you imagine coming up with an invention so cool that your parents didn't make you do chores anymore? That's pretty exciting. All right, so here we got Tony. And what's he carrying? Puppets. I'm going to keep flipping back and forth so I can read and you can see. When Tony grew up, he moved to London, where he discovered that no one was making marionettes for kids anymore. So out of wood, cloth, and strings, Tony began to make puppets. He figured out ways to make his marionettes' movements so lifelike that they performed as if they were real actors. Word soon spread about Tony's amazing marionettes. When Tony moved to New York City, the Tony Sarg marionettes began performing on Broadway. In the heart of New York City, in Herald Square, was the biggest store on earth, R.H. Macy's department store. Macy's had heard about Tony's puppets and asked him to design a puppet parade for the store's holiday windows. So Tony made new puppets based on storybook characters, then attached them to gears and pulleys to make them move. So what storybook character do we have here? Humpty Dumpty. And so these were made for window displays, and they were animated through gears. In Macy's Wondertown windows, Tony's mechanical marionettes danced across the stage as if by magic. All day long they performed to shoppers, jostling for a better look. But Macy's had an even bigger job in store for Tony. Many of the people working at Macy's were immigrants, and as the holidays approached, they missed their own holiday traditions of music and dancing in the streets. Macy's agreed to put on a parade for their employees, and they hired Tony to help. Tony was an immigrant, so he loved the idea of creating a parade based on street carnivals from all over the world. He made costumes and built horse-drawn floats, and Macy's even arranged to bring in bears, elephants, and camels from the Central Park Zoo. Wow. Do you see those animals in the parade today? If you've seen the parade today, have you seen any animals? No, they don't really include animals anymore, do they? Here's a picture of the parade. Let's zoom in and we'll zoom across. Do you see any of those giant balloons yet? Not yet. We've got some balloons, but not the giant ones. The animals joined hundreds of Macy's employees on Thanksgiving Day in 1924, winding their way from Harlem to Herald Square. It was a dazzling parade. In fact, Macy's first parade was such a success that they decided to have one every year on Thanksgiving Day to celebrate America's own holiday. Oh, there are those animals we talked about. What animals do we have here? We have a lion and a tiger. Grr. Each year the parade grew, but when Macy's brought in lions and tigers, in addition to the bears, elephants and camels, the animals roared and growled and frightened the children. Look at those kids. Oh my goodness. Tony, can you think of something spectacular? Okay. Macy's asked Tony to replace the animals. Ah, so that's why we don't see animals anymore. Here are some puppets. Tony hoped to replace the animals with some kind of puppets, but his marionettes were less than 3 feet tall. He would have to make much larger puppets in order for them to be seen in parades. And how could you make them strong enough to hold up in bad weather, yet light enough to move up and down the streets? Tony knew of a company in Ohio that made blimps out of rubber, the perfect material for any weather. When he called the company and showed them his sketches, they agreed to make what Tony wanted. Still, how could Tony make his puppets move? Then Tony had an idea from an Indonesian rod puppet in his toy collection. What do you think the idea is? How do you handle this puppet? It sticks, right? Aha! On Thanksgiving Day, Tony's creatures, some as high as 16 feet, spilled into the streets, and the crowds cheered wildly. Part puppet, part balloon, the air-filled rubber bags wobbled down the avenues, propped up by wooden sticks. See, they got all the people manning the balloons. But you might notice something that's different about these ones than the ones you see today. Look at where the people are and look at where the balloons are. Are the balloons very high? No, they're still pretty low, right? But now the sidewalks were so packed with people that only those in the first few rows could really see the parade. Tony realized his puppets would have to be even bigger and higher off the ground. And though the sticks needed to steer the puppets, they were stiff and heavy. Tony wanted his balloons to articulate, to move and gesture, more like puppets. But how? With a marionette, the controls were above and the puppet hangs down. But what doesn't work like that? What's that? A balloon. But what if the controls were below and the puppet could rise up? During the next year, Tony set his new idea into motion. This time, he asked the company in Ohio to make balloons out of rubberized silk, as strong as rubber, but lighter than rubber alone. Most important, Tony ordered the balloons to be filled not just with air, but with helium too. Since helium is lighter than air, it would make the balloons rise. Once the puppets were completed, they were deflated and shipped back to Tony in New York. Tony did not know if everything would go as planned. What if the balloons are filled with too much helium? What if one hits a sharp object? Will they fit under the L, the elevated train track? It was still dark on Thanksgiving morning when Tony filled the balloons with helium, tethering them down with sandbags. By 1 p.m., the sidewalks were packed with people ready for the parade. Then, one by one, Tony cut the lines to the sandbags. Let's have a parade! Are those balloons still low? No. And the magnificent upside-down marionettes rose up in the skies. Look at how much higher they are than the old balloons. And these are like the balloons that you see today. Nodding and waving to the crowds below, they sailed past Central Park. They sailed down Broadway. They shimmied and swayed through the canyons of New York City. High above the crowds, they flounced in the afternoon wind, pulling the rope handlers this way and that. Yet with every heave-ho, the balloons gestured and articulated like wild puppets, and the crowd screamed for more. After the balloons were eased under the L, they ended in front of Macy's at Tony's Wondertown windows. It was a parade New Yorkers would never forget. And from that day on, every Thanksgiving morning, crowds have lined the sidewalks of New York City to see what new balloons would rise to the skies from Macy's famous parade. Tony Sarg, the puppeteer who loved to figure out how to make things move, had set the stage, with a little rigging, for a puppet to be anything anyone could imagine it to be. The end. And if you check out this book from the library, we also have an author's note with some more information about both the artwork and about the history of the story. And if you look close here, we also have a picture of Tony Sarg with one of his balloons. All right, I hope you enjoyed this story. I love reading it. I love sharing it. The Macy's Day Parade is going to be a little different this year with the pandemic going on, but I thought it would still be fun to celebrate this. Now, in my follow-up video, I'm going to give you some instructions on how to make your own marionette puppet at home using just some simple items that you might already have around the house. So please check that out and stay tuned for our next Big Kid Story Time.